Right up in the air. Show them how clever you are, Philip. Come on. Right up in the air. Come on. Up in the air.
Over the last 100 years or so, there have been many groups of people who meet regularly to sit in what are called mediumistic circles. This is done in the hope of receiving messages from the spirits of their deceased friends and relatives. In a typical sitting or séance, the participants are seated with their hands on top of a table, sometimes with their fingers touching, sometimes not. It is said that the spirit who is supposed to be present often causes a variety of strange physical effects to occur, as is suggested by this engraving made in 1871 when spiritualism was in its heyday. In the old days, there was serious doubt as to whether these phenomena were genuine. It was believed that for them to occur, a specially endowed person known as a spirit medium had to be present if the spirits were to be able to manifest these effects. Undoubtedly, many of these spirit mediums were fraudulent. It was also easy to cheat because it was believed that the sittings, or séances, had to be in darkness or in a subdued light. Research by Sir William Crookes, who worked with the famous medium D.D. Home in A Good Light, and by Harry Price and other famous investigators who studied Stella Cranshaw in 1923, proved that some of these physical phenomena were genuine and not the result of trickery. Whether we believe in spirits or not, it shows that there are forces in the universe at present unknown to science and different from the four forces known to physicists. In 1972, a group consisting of 8 members of the Society for Psychical Research in Toronto, Canada, decided to find out more about this mysterious force. They wanted to find out, firstly, whether it could be produced in full light. Secondly, whether a spirit medium was necessary, or if instead it could be generated by ordinary people. And thirdly, if the force was produced by a disembodied spirit, or instead was generated by the living participants in the circle. Dr. George Owen, director of the Toronto Society for Psychical Research, guided the sessions from the beginning.
The members of the group are regarded as perfectly normal people, or as normal as anyone can actually be. 4 are housewives: Sue, Dorothy, Andy, and Iris. Sid is a salesman, Bernice an accountant, Al is an engineer, and Lorne a designer. None of them claims to be a medium. Psychical research is just one of their many diverse interests. As researchers, the group had to be scrupulous in their approach. The first problem they had to solve was this: how to be sure that if they got physical effects, these were not due to a spirit. So they decided to make up a completely fictional character, an imaginary person with the given name of Philip and a completely imaginary biography.
Why don't you do it? You could make it all right if you think I could.
A week later, she narrated the story of Philip.
This is it. Philip was an aristocratic Englishman living in the middle 1600s at the time of Oliver Cromwell. He was married to a beautiful but cold and frigid wife, Dorothea. One day when out riding, Philip came across a gypsy encampment and saw there a beautiful gypsy girl, Margot, and fell instantly in love with her. He brought her back secretly to live in the gatehouse near the stables of Dittingen Manor, his family home. For some time he kept his love nest a secret, but eventually Dorothea, realizing he was keeping someone else there, found Margot and accused her of witchcraft in stealing her husband. Philip was too scared of losing his reputation and his possessions to protest at the trial of Margot, and she was convicted of witchcraft and burned at the stake. Philip subsequently was stricken with remorse. Finally, one morning his body was found at the bottom of the battlements whence he had cast himself in a fit of agony and remorse.
Oh, that's a nice. You really used your imagination on that one.
The group discussed the life and character they had given Philip until they were all agreed on the details. A picture was drawn by Andy and agreed to be a true likeness of Philip. It should be stressed that though Diddington Manor is a real place, there is no evidence that anyone like Philip ever lived there. In addition, some historical errors were deliberately introduced into the story to emphasize its fictitious nature.
pictured him? Is this the way we've
Oh, yes, definitely. Yes, I think you got it exactly. Especially the eyes.
To consolidate the idea of Philip and to put themselves in mutual rapport, the group met weekly to meditate on Philip and his adventures. No apparition of Philip appeared, but observers occasionally noted a slight mistiness in the center of the circle. However, this may merely have resulted from visual fatigue. In the fall of 1973, the group changed their approach as a result of reading articles by Mr. Batcheldor and Mr. Brooks Smith and Mr. Hunt, which appeared in the Journal of the British Society for Psychical Research.
We've been trying to levitate a table.
These investigators had got physical effects by sitting round a table as in the old spiritualist seances. But they created an atmosphere of jollity and relaxation. They told jokes, sang songs, and exhorted the table in a light-hearted way to obey their commands. The Toronto group adopted the same approach, singing such ditties as Lloyd George Knew My Father to the tune of Onward Christian Soldiers, playing music such as Greensleeves or Amazing Grace, and addressing questions to the table as if it really were Philip. And between sittings, objects suggestive of Philip, such as fencing foils, 17th century manuscripts, and pictures of Diddington Hall were kept. For most sittings, the same four-legged table was used.
It's not easy for 8 responsible normal adults to fool around in this way. They had to train themselves in a particular psychological attitude. They had to imitate a stage comedian who may give a very farcical performance on stage, but off the stage is sober and practical.
As soon as the group adopted this new approach, they got phenomena. First there came a vibration in the table. Also, raps came out of the table. They seemed to come from inside the woodwork.
Hello, Philip. Are you there?
Good morning, Philip.
Good morning, Philip. Hi, Philip. I heard you bought some more new horses.
Come on. Speak up. Let's hear some knocks.
Come on, let's get some bangs. Come on, let's get going.
Have you brought Dorothea with you? Have you seen Dorothea lately? No. No. Would you like to see Dorothea lately? No. No. Didn't you love Dorothea in your time? No. That was too...
A bit louder, Philip, please.
Yes, we need them louder. Philip, come on, do it louder.
Good and loud. Good and loud.
Yes. Philip, did you like Dorothea?
Oh.
Did you love Margot? Margot.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Say it again. Did you love Margot? Good.
Come on. Then the table would actually move. It would glide over the thick pile carpet, or even rear up on 1 or 2 legs only. Attempts to reproduce this motion by pushing always fail. It was impossible to imitate the table's spontaneous motion.
The group has succeeded many times. Visitors have watched their proceedings in bright light or even joined the group at the table. It's clear that there's no possibility that the phenomena are produced by trickery. The Society's research committee under Dr. Owen has taken every precaution to obviate fraud and can state categorically that the phenomena are genuine and paranormal.
We found that Philip, the imaginary communicator, will answer questions put to him by sitters or visitors. 1 rap for yes, 2 raps for no. Philip, of course, has no independent existence. He says just what a majority of the sitters happen to think he ought to say. It is a case of psychokinesis by committee. If a question has an obvious answer, the response, whether in the form of 1 rap or 2, comes promptly and with emphasis. If, however, the members of the committee take time to individually reason out what the question means, or are doubtful as to the right answer, then the response is feebler and delayed.
Dr. Joel Witten, a medical psychologist, was asked to comment.
Well, I'd first like to emphasize that this is an important experiment because it's done in a laboratory and it's reproducible. Now, from a psychological point of view, there are several considerations. First is, I have to ask myself, what are the psychological conditions necessary to produce this phenomenon? Now, it seems to me that the group is in a childlike creativity. This is brought on by the playing and by the singing and the humor. The group lets their hair down. As opposed to the adult who says, this phenomenon can't be done because it's against the laws of physics, the child simply says, if I want to do it, it can be done. Now, second, I ask myself, what does this rapping and the table turning mean symbolically? Is it some type of concentration of energy, or is it an elaborate defense mechanism against some deep-seated unconscious conflict? Third, the group is involved in a joint feeling of mutuality. Each member almost intuitively senses the other person and their feelings, and as such, it has important overtones in various group programs.
Oh, I think this Phillips experiment has forced me to look at the whole spectrum of parapsychology. I've always believed that there's a little bit of telepathy and precognition, but 2 years ago, if you had told me that a group of us would be able to take this table and move it without any physical force, I think I would have laughed at you.
Well, I think this whole concept has made me much more aware of energy forces around that before you were aware of but didn't really think about.
I can't see any way that any of us can move the table ourselves, so there's got to be energy or something which would be very interesting if we could find out how it works.
The experiment on Philip has been a very exciting thing for me because it has taken an abstract thought of mine and made it into a concrete experiment.
It's offered an alternative explanation to me to the theory of spirits of the dead causing hauntings. The hauntings seem to be real, but I have no faith in the departed spirits theory.
I think it's been the most exciting parapsychological experiment that I've ever taken part in. We've been interested in these physical phenomena for so many years, and I feel that at last we've made a breakthrough.
The group of 8 has shown that a team of normal, non-mediumistic people can acquire a kind of psychological skill, enabling them to generate a strong physical force without the aid of spirits or supernatural influence. They have proved that this force is latent in most ordinary human beings. To gain understanding of this force, they are continuing their work. They hope also that with new and original variations, it will be imitated by other investigators.
Father knows Lloyd George. Lloyd George knows my father. And father knows Lloyd George. Philip, would you like some more of that?
On this program, you meet ESP, extra special people, who explore that shadowy world that lies on the border between science and superstition, the known and the unknown. And on the program today, you won't believe it, our guest is a talking table named Philip. Now, just a moment. Before you tune out, I haven't freaked out completely. We'll explain who and what Philip, the talking table, is. I have a guest in human form, Mrs. Iris Owen of the Toronto Society for Psychical Research. And, of course, Iris, we've worked together in the society for some time now. Tell us about Philip, the talking table, the imaginary ghost, how the whole thing started.
Well, it sounds absolutely crazy, of course, but in fact it is a serious scientific experiment. And George and I, my husband, have been interested in this field for many years.
And let me say, Iris, because you might be too modest, that your husband, George Owen, is a distinguished parapsychologist, as well as being a noted scientist in other areas.
Yes, indeed. And we were very fortunate to come to Canada 5 years ago to devote most of our time to the fringe areas of science, and particularly parapsychology. And this actual experiment arose out of a discussion we were having one night on what was the nature of a ghost. And it followed the investigation that we had done in Toronto of a haunted house where, in fact, some of our investigating team had seen what they thought was an hallucination or a ghost. And we discussed what it could be. Was it really the spirit of departed people? And we couldn't believe that this was so. But if it was an hallucination, which was the conclusion we came to, we said to ourselves, well, why can't we create our own hallucination? If we could create a hallucination ourselves, then we would know a bit more about this.
So you decided to try to make...
We decided to try and make our own ghost. And we called the group that were doing it the Ghost Creating Group. Well, we didn't know at first how to go about it. There aren't any sort of do-it-yourself ideas about this.
No on-the-job training in making ghosts.
No. And so we decided that if we were going to prove that it wasn't a departed spirit, we had to invent a story. We had to invent a character. And not even a well-known storybook character would do. And one of our groups, Sue, who has a beautiful imagination, invented our ghost for us. And then we spent a year, and I mean one night every week for a whole year, we spent in meditation and thinking about our ghost and trying to conjure up a vision of him.
Now, you had a character, you invented him, you gave him a name, Philip, and you gave him a history. Then you tried to get him to communicate.
This was the idea.
All right, what was the history of Philip?
Well, we set him in the 1500s in England at the time of Oliver Cromwell. He was a cavalier. He had been a supporter of Charles. He was married to a beautiful and frigid wife, Dorothea, married for the sake of joining the estates. And he, while riding around his estates one day, he met a beautiful gypsy girl, Margot, dark-eyed, beautiful gypsy girl, and he fell instantly in love with her, took her back to the castle where he hid her in the stables or in the dower house, and later his wife discovered her and blamed her charged her with being a witch, charged her with witchcraft and said she'd stolen her husband. And Philip himself was too concerned both for his own personal safety. By then Cromwell was on the throne, and also for the financial side of his estates, to defend her. And so she was tried and burnt at the stake.
He was a craven wretch.
We didn't think he was quite that craven. As a matter of fact, he was so distraught afterwards that he finally jumped from the battlements of the castle one night. His body was found at the foot of the battlements. And then the story that Sue invented, every century or so, his ghost is seen walking the battlements, searching for his lost love.
Okay, how did you go about getting this imaginary ghost then to communicate?
Well, as I say, at first we meditated for a whole year, and we didn't get anything very much in the way of results, so we're beginning to feel a bit despondent, and maybe we were wrong after all. And then we came across some work of some English experimenters in the British Society for Psychical Research some 8 to 9 years ago, where they had worked on an experiment to make a table rise, levitate a table. They were working on physical, what we call, in the trade I was going to say, but as parapsychologists, the physical phenomena, rappings, movements, the sound of trumpets, the kind of thing that happened a great deal in the Victorian-type seance room in the Victorian days, when spiritualism began and when this kind of thing was, in fact, more of a parlour game than anything in its beginning. But Kenneth Batcheldor had evolved a theory that if you trained yourself in a certain psychological skill, which was similar to the Victorian seance room, in other words, if you sat around and you sang repetitive songs and you told jokes and you worked in a relaxed atmosphere
and got into the spirit of the thing.
Into the spirit, literally the spirit of the thing, you would produce these physical phenomena, the raps and so on.
And did Philip appear?
You're jumping the gun a little. At that stage, we said to ourselves, well, if this works for physical phenomena, why shouldn't it produce our ghost? And so we decided to try this. Now, we read the literature very thoroughly, and there are many, many papers on it, and there is a philosophical reasoning as to why it works, and this is too short a program for me to explain it. But we tried it, and the first sitting or two, we were a little bit self-conscious. It's not very easy. We're all serious, scientifically minded people, really, and to sit around and do all this sort of nonsense.
Talk to a table.
Talk to a table wasn't very... We weren't at that stage thinking that we were talking to the table. We were surprised when suddenly one night we heard a rap from the table, quite a loud rap. And we thought, what is this? And we sat there very much surprised, and I think it was Dorothy said, well, perhaps it's Philip. And immediately there was another rap. And so we said, well, rap once for yes and two for no. Are you Philip? And there was another rap. And so this did surprise us very much. And so we carried on a little conversation like this, rather nonplussed the first time.
Did you get movements then rather quickly?
Shortly afterwards, the table kind of slid a bit.
Right.
And of course, then we all accused each other of pushing it, naturally. We couldn't believe that it would move by itself.
When it really happened, you couldn't believe it yourself?
Oh, no, not at first. And in fact, the first few months we were watching each other like hawks, and if anybody's finger moved the slightest bit, you're pushing, this sort of thing.
Well, Iris, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to introduce our viewers to Philip, the talking table, and the rest of the Philip group, and we're hoping that Philip will put in an appearance and do some communicating with us today.
Give a nice, big, loud one for the cameras, and we'll all be quiet. Come on.
Here we are, and my guest is Philip the Talking Table and his 8 friends, and you're going to be introduced to each one of them in a moment. But right now, Philip has been communicating through some raps.
Come on, Philip, a real loud one. Come on.
Very loud. Say hello. Come on, say hello.
That's right. Now do it louder.
Say hello to all the people.
It's a big audience you've got out there. Say hello to everybody.
Come on. Really loud. Come on, show off.
Come on, Philip. You know you're a ham actor. Come on, you can say it. You can do it. A really loud one. No, we don't want you to move. We want lots of nice, loud raps. Come on.
Come on, let's sing.
We'll sing your song. Loud.
Willie, say hello to each one of you in turn. Why don't we go around the table, each one of you give your name, and say hello to Philip, and we'll ask Philip to respond.
Oh, that's...
Starting with you, Iris.
Hello, Philip. This is Iris. You know me. Say hello. No, he's not.
Hi, Philip. This is Sydney. You going to say hi today?
With a little one.
There's the little one, yeah.
I should say we've got a microphone under the table to pick up these pings or raps. Andy?
Oh, it's Andy Henry here.
No.
Going to say hi to me? You said it before you spoke.
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
No, he was responding to Alan.
Go on.
Hello, Philip. It's Bernice. You going to say hello tonight?
Yes, you got one.
A little bit louder, please.
Louder, Philip. Long?
Lauren?
That's Lauren Hanlon. Hello, Philip.
Did we get one there?
He's not talking for you.
Nope.
You try it.
Hello, Philip. It's Al.
Nice one for Al. He likes Al.
A little louder, Philip, if you please.
Hi, Philip. It's Dorothy here.
Oh, there's one.
Yes.
Hello, Philip. It's Sue.
Oh, right.
Now say hello to Alan.
Hello, Philip.
Good.
Here's a good
nice,
one.
good one.
Oh, another one.
Now, I think we should say that these raps have come in a number of different circumstances with outside witnesses present, including a psychiatrist, and they have agreed that the raps do indeed seem to come from inside the table. They're not being produced by anybody here. The microphone is picking up these raps, and they appear to come from inside the table.
Well, if you can see that all our hands are absolutely still and we're standing up and our feet are on a carpeted floor, so nobody could be kicking or tapping or the sort of things that are usually alleged in these
Right. Why don't you rev it up and
situations.
see if Philip will put on some antics for us?
Oh, I'm sure he will. Come on. Oh, there's nothing he likes better.
okay, but don't flip.
Now, mind, there's a microphone underneath the table.
Come on. Show them what you can do.
Come on,
But straight up.
Come on, right up. Right in the air. Right up in the air, and then they'll just prove it. Come on, Philip. Up in the air, Junior Birdman. Up in the air, and upside down. Up in the air, Junior Birdman.
Oh, don't tip it, Philip.
Mind the microphone.
Right on your...
Up in the air.
This table is in bad shape.
Come on, back the other way. Come on,
Philip. Back again.
Bring it back here, Philip, please.
Come on, mind the microphone. Let's lift it back.
How many tables have you demolished since you started?
We've demolished quite a number.
No, I should say that I was present on one occasion when you were using a rather heavy wooden table and the leg broke off it that night.
That's right, yes. And we have used 2 or 3 heavy wooden tables, but one of the troubles...
Philip, wait, don't.
Can Philip turn the table right upside down?
Right upside down,
Come on, turn it over.
Up, okay, right over.
Right over.
Go on, Philip. Right over.
Right over.
Come on.
No, not that way. All that way. Mind the microphone.
Right over.
Come on, Philip.
Come on, Philip. Right over.
Right over.
I
Knock it
don't think
over.
you can because that leg's in an awkward
Check it over.
position.
Don't knock the mic. What are you doing? Get away.
That's it. Go and get Sydney. Go on, chase Sydney then. Chase Sydney.
Get
Come on,
away.
feel like.
That's Al touching your leg.
Now, in some experiments, you have put paper doilies on the table under your hands, haven't you?
Yes, this is to keep
To show that you couldn't possibly be applying pressure or friction.
That's right,
And
yes.
yet the table has bounced around the same way.
around just the same way.
Things on the table, too.
And sometimes things will stick to the table. If we put a sweet or something like this, it will stick even although the table...
Suppose I put my ring on there. Do you think it
just
might stay?
It might.
I'm putting my ring onto the table.
Yes, Philip. Now, you've got Alan's ring. Why don't you swallow it right now?
Hang on to it, Philip.
Come on, Philip.
Do you want your ring
You want it bent?
All right, bend my ring if you can, Philip.
Bend it, Philip.
Bend it. This is how you begin to bend it. No, not the leg. Not the leg. Not the leg. But you know what's staying on the ring? You know what's the ring staying on?
Well, it stayed quite a while. It stayed quite a while. The trouble is that the table is...
Now, I take it that if you've demolished several tables, Philip then doesn't have a preference for one particular table. He moves from one to the other.
Any table, anywhere.
Big oak dining room table.
Yes, and one of the reasons why we don't use the big tables quite so much is because we're frightened of the house getting damaged. The last time we used a wooden garden table, he went and knocked holes in the wall.
And he's also produced raps and thumps in the wall of the room, hasn't he?
Yes.
What about the big question? Has Philip ever been able to get the table off the floor completely, all 4 legs?
Well, once, yes. Well, why don't you do it tonight, Philip? He did it once. It was only about half an inch off the floor, and it only went for 2 or 3 feet. But there were 2 other witnesses in the room, and it was a thick carpeted floor. If it had been, you could have seen the...
Right. Well, let's try it now, Philip.
Come on, Philip, then. Come on, this is your big opportunity. Maybe your last opportunity. Come on, right up. Right up.
Right up.
Straight up. Come on.
Right up.
Straight up.
Come on,
Straight up.
Come on, bro.
Right across the floor. Come on,
Shall we sing your song? Up in the air, Junior
Birdsman, up in the air and upside down. Up in the air, Junior Birdsman, with your feet planted firmly on the ground. Up in the air, Junior Birdsman, up in the air. No, Philip, you gotta lift the tip up.
Right
We're
up.
having trouble with these legs.
Now, the other one.
He's wrecked 4 tables, and now he's working on his 5th.
Well, this one's just been repaired for about
What about turning the table upside down? And I know that this has happened. Getting the wraps while the table is upside down. Let's do that.
We can do anything you want.
All right.
within reach.
Let's keep it within range of our trusty microphone here.
Yes.
All right.
That's right.
Now, the bottom of the table is clearly exposed.
Hello, Philip. Come on, Philip. Come on, Philip. Now,
Oh,
everybody.
You got dentist handicap?
There was a good laugh there.
Right.
even joined in here.
Hello, Philip. Are you there? Oh,
that's
that was the microphone. Yeah. Hello, Philip. Are you enjoying being here tonight? Come on, Philip.
Come on, Phil.
Come on, Philip. Say hello. Are you still there?
Oh,
There was a wrap.
He loves his beer, perhaps.
Why don't you
Oh, Philip, if you perform, you should have a nice big pint of beer. Would you like that? Good.
Yes.
Now, that was the loudest rap of the evening.
Yes, he loves beer. He loves beer.
Keep on that theme there.
100 bottles of beer in the wall.
100 bottles of beer.
100 bottles of top of the fall. 99 bottles of beer on the wall. 99 bottles of beer on the wall. 99 bottles of beer.
Would you like 2 bottles of beer?
Oh, the circulation.
Yes.
A little bit louder
A
than
little
that.
louder than that. Let Alan hear that you want 2 bottles
on,
of beer.
Philip,
He's
let me
going to
hear
buy
you.
it.
Let me hear you.
There?
Yeah?
There's a wrap.
There.
Now, all hands are visible. Let's just dwell on this point. All hands are visible at this point, yet the wraps are clearly coming from, it would appear, certainly from within that table. Let's try it again. Philip, give us a good, loud, clear rap.
For 1 bottle of beer.
Louder than that.
Come on, louder, Philip.
Louder for 2.
Come on, Philip.
Philip, if you want a bottle of beer, rap loudly.
That was it.
Louder, Philip?
Come on,
Louder.
Philip, louder. Here comes the microphone.
It has to be louder, Alan won't buy it.
Come on, Philip.
Come on.
What?
Right,
I didn't hear
right
you.
under the microphone, Philip.
Right here, Phil. Right here.
Keep your
Right
hands
here.
up.
No, he's doing it over
Come
in
on,
that corner.
come on,
He's over
Philip,
in that
louder
corner.
and
Come on,
louder.
Louder.
That's better. Oh, good for you, Philip. You
All
should
right.
have your bottle of beer.
Congratulations, Philip. All right, let's stand him up, right side up.
Oh, good thing the blood stopped in my mouth.
What sort of questions does Philip respond to? Can we ask him about sex and beer are his preoccupations. Well, let's ask him some questions.
Cavalier.
Oh, yes. There you go, Sidney.
What's the chocolate horse here?
There's Dorothea here.
Philip, have you got Dorothea with you?
No.
No. Have you got Margot with you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Now, Margot was his lover, the gypsy.
The gypsy girl, yes.
Right.
Yes. What else shall we ask him?
Can we...
Lilith.
Did you bring... Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yes. Is Lilith here? Lilith...
Now, who's Lilith?
Lilith is another group. I told you that this was a scientific experiment.
Right.
And experiments have to be repeatable. So we decided that if our thesis was true, another group of people should be able to do the same thing with a different story.
So Lilith is
with
another
that,
imaginary
Lilith
ghost.
is another imaginary ghost. She is a heroine of the French resistance who was lived in Canada and was sent out to France during wartime to work with the French resistance. She was betrayed and shot as a spy by the Germans.
Right.
And she had a Canadian officer lover, and Philip has met Lilith, and he's quite friendly
Let me
with
just
her.
ask any of you who would like to answer. Now, you are all thoughtful, intelligent people. You have professional backgrounds. You're skilled in your various fields. How do you really feel about this Philip phenomenon? Sue?
I think that it is a purely physical thing coming from the brain, that any human being who is trained in the skill could do it. It's just, it takes some training to develop the skill, and I think it's a source of energy which perhaps we have helped to find, and that it may someday be used as a source of energy.
Lauren Hinwood, how do you feel about it?
Well, I'm just thinking of it in respect to the fact that we've produced artificially the sort of effects that you generally get from what are generally supposed to be ghosts.
In other words, the minds of you people working on this together have been able to produce movements in this table, raps in answers to your questions, all the things that traditionally ghosts have done. So are you saying then that the traditional ghost may have been a projection from the minds of living people?
That's my view.
Do you all agree with that?
Yes.
It could be.
It could be a
It
thought.
could be. Yeah. It could be. Yes. Yeah.
This is one of the answers to it.
Okay, let's ask Philip a question. We've got about 1 minute left for Philip here in this command performance. What's going to get him to give us a good loud answer as a kind of grand finale for him? You people know his feelings.
Come on, Sue, you'll
Ask him.
Does he love, what's the gypsy?
Do you like Margot? Yeah. Are you do you still love Margot, Philip? Sue, you ask him questions.
Do you want to come on TV again, Philip?
He's gone shy on
May
it.
have heard it, sure.
Yeah.
No.
Are you still there, Philip?
Yes, he's still there.
Give us one more rap for goodbye.
Say goodbye to Alan.
A real loud one.
Louder than that. He's saying no. He doesn't want to go.
Never mind.
Give us one rap, Philip.
We must go, Philip. One loud goodbye for everyone.
Do you miss Joel? Good.
That's better.
That's better. Louder
Okay.
still.
Say goodbye to George.
We're going to have to say goodbye to Philip for now, and we'll be back in a moment to wrap this up with some more information about Philip. My guest on Extra Special People is Iris Owen of the Toronto Society for Psychical Research. And Iris, that must be just about the wildest sequence ever seen on television. A group of grown people with a table bouncing around and answering questions. But let's get serious now. It's a marvelous party game, having a talking table, but there's something deeper than that involved. What are the implications of this Philip experiment?
Well, of course, as you say, Alan, it is a serious scientific experiment. And there are two aspects of it that are important. First, the part that is of interest to the physicists. How does a combined thought from a group of people transform itself into something that can produce a physical effect, such as a noise or a table movement?
I should say that to me, these pings from within the table are the most singular thing about the phenomenon. And I have put my hand on the table more than once and felt the vibration, the pulsation directly under it.
Yeah, it is a most extraordinary
Now, what's
thing.
the second thing?
The second thing, of course, is of interest to psychologists. The psychological background of a group of people getting themselves into a state of mind where they can, in fact, share a common thought and produce these things.
For one thing, you have to be in a kind of childlike frame of mind, don't you?
We describe it as a psychological skill, and it's learnt just as in the same way that when you're learning to play the piano, you have to start with the scales and go all the way through until you can play something in the nature of classical music. This is a psychological skill that we learn in this way, and this is why it doesn't happen as often as one would think it.
Well, maybe we'll have some more imaginary ghosts around. Iris, Owen, it's been marvelous having you on the program. And we will be back again with more extra special people, and we'll be talking to interesting folks who inhabit that shadowy world that lies on the border between science and superstition, the known and the unknown. They're all unusual. They're all extra special people.